Welcome back, everybody. We have another episode of Ben on Sports, and this is a very important episode because we are reviewing the NFL season, reviewing the last week of games, reviewing my picking to see if we hit the goal of 70% correct pick percentage. If you want to get caught up on that, go back and watch previous weeks. Last week's will tell you where we are. I don't want to spoil anything. And we will even look at the NFL playoffs, and I will give you a bracket recommendation, or not a recommendation, but I'll give you my bracket picks who I think's winning the Super Bowl, kind of how I see the NFL playoffs, and then we'll end the episode. Thank you for coming and spending more of your time. Watch this episode. I hope you stay to the end. Also, with the NFL season ending and being in the playoffs, we're going to need more levels of content. Most of the channel has been all about the NFL has been all about the NFL for the most part, except for maybe 5 or 6 episodes. So if anybody has any recommendations, anything else they want to see, let me know. If you want an NHL, an NBA update, conference play just started in college basketball, if that's something you're interested in, maybe I can do a conference play, look into conference play. Who knows, right? So if you want to see something else, please put it in the comments. I want to make stuff that people are going to listen to, all right? So don't be afraid to let me know what you want to see. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. First game of the week, the Saturday slate, 2 Saturday games, both AFC North battles. The Ravens and the Browns, pretty much what everybody expected. The Ravens won this one easily, 35-10. They locked up they not because of this win, but they did end up locking the division up. They are the 3 seed. The Browns, great draft pick position. We'll see if they can turn it anything. The Browns, after making the playoffs last year, you're hoping Deshaun Watson would have done something. He did nothing, and then he got hurt and missed most of the year anyway. So the Browns would really probably just need a rebuild. They still have some really good pieces. I'll be interested to see if this offseason, if they decide to blow everything up and trade guys like Myles Garrett, or if they try and find their quarterback, try and fill in some of their other holes, and make another push with some of the pieces they still do have. We'll see. The Ravens, when they're playing to the best of their ability, that defense is playing well. The offense is almost unstoppable when it's playing the way it's supposed to. You got Derrick Henry, who's gashes teams on the ground. Then you have Lamar Jackson and his various weapons. 2 tight ends that can hurt you in that offense. 2 or 3 wide receivers that Lamar Jackson feels comfortable with. And Lamar Jackson, you're going to drop back and take away all my options. I'm just going to run the ball. The Ravens offense is hard to stop. When the defense is playing well, it's hard to score. They're one of the best teams in the NFL, and this was a good performance to get the win and keep some momentum going into the playoffs. Who did I pick to win? I did pick the Ravens. That's a good start in a week where we need 11 wins to get to that 70% threshold. Bengals and Steelers. The Bengals needed this game. They needed to win this game if they wanted a chance at the playoffs. The Steelers needed to win this game if they wanted to have a chance at winning the division, and they needed to win this game if they wanted to clinch the 5 seed, so they wouldn't have had to go to Baltimore. And the Bengals picked up a big win. They kept their playoff hopes alive. They finished with a winning season after a dreadful start. They had so many close games. Think about how good their season could have been if some of them would have been flipped, including an earlier game against the Steelers. The Steelers, I'm very worried about. I'm very worried about their ability to beat top-tier teams. I know they beat the Ravens once, and they've beaten teams with winning records like the Commanders. I'm still not 100% sold on them, especially their offense. And teams that can match their defensive line is very good, and but teams are not going to be scared. Good teams are not scared of the Steelers' defensive line. They're going to be able to be just as physical, be able to deal out just as much punishment. So I'm worried about the Steelers in the playoffs, especially since they are a wild card team and they're going to be going on the road the first round. Big win from the Bengals. Unfortunately, it did not get them into the playoffs. In some ways, it could have hurt them. It's like you want to win the game if you make the playoffs, but if we lose the game and if we're not going to make the playoffs and we lose the game, maybe we get a better draft pick. You're not thinking about that. You're paid to win games. You're paid to play your best, and you're paid to try and make it to the playoffs. or to do everything you can at least to make playoffs. Bengals picked up the win. Moving on to I did pick the Bengals to win 2-0. Great start. Moving on to Sunday slate, the Falcons and the Panthers, an overtime game. It was not the only one of the week. The Panthers looked really good, at least offensively, and quite frankly, I'm disappointed in the Falcons' defense. It looked like Penix found some comfortability in this game. The Falcons' offense as a whole it seemed like they were comfortable, scored a lot of points, 38 in regulation, in fact, but the defense was not up to snuff. And it's kind of disappointing because the Falcons are a team that you feel like have had talent the last couple years and they can just never quite put it all together. And this Falcons team is no different in my mind. Definitely a disappointing result to the season. What lost some games they should have won in a lot of people's minds that probably kept them out of the playoffs. Especially this one. The Panthers have been playing well as late, but this is a game, especially at home, you have to win. A win wouldn't have guaranteed them the playoffs, but you have to play better than that when your playoff life is on the line. And give credit to the Panthers. Bryce Young and the offense have looked significantly better the last month and a half of the season. And they continue to look here, maybe something to build on for next year. Although, in my opinion, they looked a little bit better towards the end of last year, and it still didn't translate to the beginning of this year. That doesn't actually mean the same thing will happen next offseason. Panthers have some hope, I guess, moving into next year. Big win for the Panthers in overtime. Bad loss for the Falcons. Who did I pick to win? I did pick the Falcons, which moves me to 2-1 on the week. Next game, Commanders and the Cowboys, and the Commanders needed to win this game, especially because they were still in a fight for the 6th seed, which I think everybody would rather go to Tampa and play Tampa than go to Philly and play Philly, especially with the way Philly has played this year when Jalen Hurts is healthy. And a close divisional matchup. It was in Dallas. Dallas, their season was over. But you never want to let your division rival win a game, especially at home. You really want to be able to spoil their season if you can. And quite frankly, again, Dallas, I mean, they're back half of the top 10. I don't even know if they are the top 10. I literally just had my draft ratings put down. They might be 11 or 12. I digress. Dallas, really not a whole lot of reason to win this game, and they still tried to. They almost did. Good job by the Commanders to pull it out in the end, especially because they got some rest for their guys, which is always nice to give them a little bit of rest before going into the playoffs, because not every team gets to do that. Not a whole lot else to say because it was some backups from the Commanders, especially at quarterback, but important one for them to lock up the 6th seed, where they avoid the Eagles in the first round. Who did I pick? I did pick the Commanders just because they actually had something to play for. Bears and Packers, and the Bears wanted to make me right. Gosh darn it! When they were 4-2, I said they were going to lose every game the rest of the season. They lost every game the rest of the season. Got to week 18 and decided to finally kick a game-winning field goal, make it, and not give up any more points. The Bears pick up their first win over Green Bay in years, and it was on the road in Green Bay. Bears, I really don't know. I mean, you spoiled, in a way, you spoiled where the Packers could be seated. So maybe you take some solace in that. You never want to lose to your rival, and you want some momentum going into next year. But I still maintain that this really wasn't a game the Bears needed to win. But again, even if it doesn't make sense all the time for draft position, everybody's a competitor. Everybody wants to win. Packers, I mean, this is a bad loss for them. This is a Bears team they're better than, and this is not a good look going into the playoffs. But the important thing is that you're in the playoffs, going to play an Eagles team that barely beat you in Brazil to start the season. Now, playing the Eagles in Brazil in September and playing the Eagles in Philadelphia in January are two different tasks, especially because I think the Eagles have looked better over the course of the season than the Packers. That'll definitely be an interesting game to watch. I think it'll be a fun one. But back to week 18. Big win for the Bears. Got to win number 5, finishing the season 5-12 instead of 4-13. Still going to get a decent draft pick to try and build the team around what they currently have in place there. Build around Caleb Williams. You got to think they're looking at offensive line first round. And yeah, not a whole lot to say for Packers. It just wasn't a good day for them. They should have won this game. I'm not sure if it would have mattered even if they did win it, if they could have jumped up to the 5 or to the 6 seed, but I digress. Who did I pick? I did pick the Packers, moving my weekly record to 3-2, and we are now not on a very good pace to hit that goal of 11 wins. Colts and Jaguars, another overtime game that the Colts win 26-23, another game that like the Colts didn't need to win. I actually think it hurt their draft because I think at least the Dolphins jumped ahead of them in the draft order. I'm not positive on that though. No, I am. But Colts are a team that missed the playoffs by 2 games. They finished 8-9. The last wildcard team was 10-7, and they actually lost to that team. So, so really, when you think about it, sorry, I was doing the math in my head. For some reason, I just had the realization that if the Colts would have beat the Broncos, I believe they would have been in the playoffs because both teams would have been 9-8. They would have had the tiebreaker, and they had the tiebreaker over the Bengals. So the Colts are a team that doesn't feel like it's good, but they were 1 game away from making the playoffs. And this Jaguars team, I think, was also better than their record. They still have a lot of stuff to figure out. I'm interested to see what happens with Doug Peterson. One really good season where they even got a playoff win, and then they started the next season really good, and then in contention for the 1 seed, I might add. And then they've fallen off a cliff ever since. Colts want to keep building to this team. Seems like there might be some stuff going on behind the scenes, according to some sources. We'll see what happens there. Good way to end the season if you're the Colts, picking up an overtime win. Jaguars losing maybe help them get a better draft pick, right? Like, it certainly didn't hurt. This was my toilet bowl game of the week. I personally really didn't watch it. I looked at the box score, looked at some highlights. Kind of what I expected. I thought the Jaguars were going to win this game. A little bit of a spoiler as to who I picked, just because the Colts season ended in week 17. So why do you want to show up for week 18 after the heartbreak? But good job by rebounding and finishing the season at 8-9 or 9-8. I can't do math right now. Yeah, 8-9. Sorry about that. I can't read my notes this week like I normally can. I normally have all this stuff written down, but props to the Colts. I still didn't think they were very good. I still think they outperformed the record they finished with is better than what they actually are. But all you can do is show up and win games regardless of circumstances. Who did I pick to win? I did pick the Jaguars, which brings my record to 3-3 on the week. It is not looking good if I am trying to hit the 11 win mark to hit 70% on the year. Patriots and Bills. This was a game I said last week I could very well see the Patriots winning it because the Bills have no reason to play any starters. Josh Allen did do the thing, and I personally think like he really doesn't deserve the record, but at the same time, he would have started this game and could have played as much as they needed him to. He wasn't hurt or anything. They just clinched a spot in the playoffs. Like, that's a good thing. But at the same time, it felt kind of corny going out there for as short of a time as he did to get the start, just to keep his start streak alive. But honestly, I think that's the biggest piece of controversy out of this game. Bills played their backups most of the game. The Patriots offense looked a little bit better. Their defense gave up 16 to the Bills backups. I don't know if that's good or bad. Biggest story here, you like Drake May and Christian Gonzalez, right? The 2 building blocks on offense and defense for the Patriots. But Gerard Mayo is fired after 1 year, which maybe isn't the most fair thing in the world. I've saw some Patriots fans didn't like him, but at the same time, he wasn't really given a whole lot to play with this year. He was given a good rookie quarterback and some weapons, and then defense on the other end. And the Patriots didn't play awful. I mean, they arguably ruined the Bengals season week 1 and went to overtime with the Patriots. They went to overtime with the Seahawks rather. Like, the Patriots weren't awful this year. They had some bad games, but they weren't awful as a team, and there's some good things to pull out of it. But nonetheless, Gerard Mayo was gone. Bills, this game didn't matter to them. They literally, win or lose, would have ended up with the same seed in the playoffs at 2. Didn't matter to them. Patriots also picking up, making their draft pick worse. They had the number 1 overall pick coming in this week, winning a game, and it cost them it. I believe they are now picking 4. I don't need to keep repeating myself. You guys know how I feel about teams that are trying to tank winning games. Who did I pick to win, though? I did pick the Bills, even though I did say last week I'm scared the Patriots are going to win this game. Excuse me. I'm going to keep that in there because I think that's funny. Hopefully you guys think that's funny as well, if you could hear that in the background. Where was I? Yeah. But yeah, I got it wrong. I should have gone with my original thought that the Patriots are going to beat the Bills backups and get some momentum, but overruled myself, and usually that doesn't end up well. So I moved to 3-4. I am under 500. Eagles Giants. Eagles at home. You never want to let your division rival win, even if it gives them a better draft pick, but they already blew their chances of the number 1 overall pick. Eagles started their backups in most places, at least all the important places. And I said last week, I still think the Eagles backups are good enough. They should beat the Giants. And if you're Philly, you don't want to lose to the Giants ever at home, regardless of the situation. And the Eagles didn't, winning a 20-13, kind of a quiet game. Not a whole lot going on. Not a lot to really talk about here. Giants heading for a top draft pick. Eagles heading for the 2nd seed in the NFC. Both of those things were known coming into this game. One team's good, one team's not. And the Eagles are so good that their backups are better than the Giants starters in a lot of ways. Who did I pick? I did pick the Eagles. This could have been an important game, especially if the Falcons won, although they were happening at the same time. Buccaneers beat the Saints in early. If you were a Bucs fan, I think you're a little bit worried. The Saints were up early, playing well, and the Buccaneers at the end, or really the second half, turned it on, got up by enough, and I believe they even rested some starters once they were up 2 possessions in the fourth quarter. Big win for the Bucs. Wouldn't have mattered even if the Falcons did win, because with this, all they had to do was win this game, and they were into the playoffs. And they made it to the playoffs as a 3 seed, meaning they get the Commanders instead of the Vikings at home, which seems like you would much rather have the Commanders, at least with the way each team has played this year. If you're the Saints, season with so much promise, right down the drain. Lost your quarterback, who had uneven play when he was healthy. They just had injuries. Now they have big salary cap questions. Where do the Saints go from here? Should they blow it up? There may be some merit to that and just say we need to start over, get a clean salary cap sheet, pick up some draft picks, and restart. Because are you going to catch up with the Buccaneers or the Falcons? Maybe, but the team is aging. And I think you got a hint what they're thinking when they traded Lattimore to the Commanders. Saints, interesting team in the offseason because they still have some pretty good players, and I don't know if they're necessarily interested in trying to make the playoffs next season. So we'll see. Buccaneers, a team that can certainly score a lot of points. Their defense has been up and down, some really good games, some really bad games. The Buccaneers were the only team in the NFC this season that were able to beat the Lions, and they did it in Detroit. The only other team that's beat the Lions is the Bills, and obviously they're in the AFC. So maybe that's interesting. Keep an eye on the Buccaneers. Have beaten the Lions once in Detroit. Maybe that's important to remember going into the playoffs. Who did I pick to win this game? I did pick the Buccaneers to beat the Saints, getting me back to 500. Titans, Texans, not a whole lot to stay here. The Texans needed some momentum. They needed a good game going into the playoffs. They got it. The Titans aren't very good. They're another team with another top 5 draft pick. Definitely, I think, looking quarterback. I don't want to get too much in the draft talk because I'll probably do an episode on that. So I'll keep it focused on the Texans, and we all knew the Titans were bad. Texans picking up a win, avenging the earlier loss this season to the Titans in Houston. And just kind of, again, not a whole lot happening here. Normal good versus bad, but you also don't want to, as the good team, you don't want to put too much on film, and you don't want to get anybody hurt also kind of game because you are going to the playoffs. But yeah, solid win by Houston. They're hosting a playoff game as the winner of their division against the Chargers. Who did I pick to win this game? I did pick the Texans. The game of teams that could have made the playoffs and were good enough, had some big wins, but lost too many important games down the stretch and had some injuries, particularly the 49ers. And the Cardinals won it at home 47-24. Not a lot to say here. It's just like both of these teams are in very similar situations in a very similar boat, in my opinion. I guess the Cardinals are kind of ascending and the 49ers are descending because they made the Super Bowl last year. The Cardinals had a top 5 pick last year, so maybe they are heading in two opposite directions. But I think both of these teams are disappointed with their seasons. The 49ers were supposed to make the playoffs this year, and the Cardinals were in position to make the playoffs through most of the season and weren't able to capitalize. So yeah, both of these teams are looking at middle of the double digit draft picks. 49ers with 6 wins on the year, Cardinals with 8. So they're both kind of in the same area, that like 12 to 16 range. So 12 to 17 range. So not top 10, but not at the back. So maybe you you can really get quality players if you're good enough anywhere in the draft. But you're going to have some high tier guys, some really good looking prospects for both of these teams that maybe they can try and build and put in place to make the playoffs next year. Because sometimes it just takes one or two good draft picks, and all of a sudden your team is competitive, especially when you have a good foundation like these two teams both do. Who did I pick to win? I did pick the Cardinals at home. Moving on, the Broncos and the Chiefs. Not a lot to say here. This game was important for the Broncos. It wasn't for the Chiefs. The Chiefs rested everybody they could. That's the way I should phrase it. My one concern with the Chiefs is that it's going to be like 3+ weeks of off time. So yes, their body should be healthy, but I do wonder when you have such a long layoff, your physicality moving into the next games, things like tackling, it's hard to replicate in-game tackling against another team. It's hard to replicate certain physical aspects of the game with 3+ weeks off, but the Chiefs have won back-to-back Super Bowls for a reason, and they're going to be rested. So Chiefs didn't really care about this game. Broncos knew this was the game they had to win, knew they couldn't lose it or they would miss the playoffs. And they were up 21-0 in the first quarter. I think they took their foot off the gas a little bit and were trying not to go, maybe rest a little bit once they got a big lead, because they kind of saw that they were in the playoffs, so they don't want to get anybody hurt. But the Broncos were playing like a team should win. They don't know if they're going to make the playoffs or not when you need to win this game, and they came out of the game playing like it at home. And the second longest streak in the NFL in terms of missing the playoffs is over with the Broncos winning this game. And just credit to them for showing up and playing the way you're supposed to when your season is on the line. And even if it was against a team who had the 1 seed locked up and it made no sense for them to show up anyway. Who did I pick? I did pick the Broncos. Rams and Seahawks. Kind of called this one. The Rams weren't really playing for anything. It is a rivalry game. The Rams ended the Seahawks season. They both finished with the same record, but the Rams take the division, already had the division clinched. And I said the Seahawks probably going to win this game, even if it's close. I don't know how many of the Rams starters are going to play, but the Seahawks at least end the season on a high note with a win, a season that had multiple game winning streaks and multiple game losing streaks. They were kind of high, low, low. It was like a roller coaster ride. And in the end, the roller coaster ride didn't result in the playoffs for Seattle. Still a lot to look forward to next year. Still have a lot of good pieces, and they're going to be getting a top 18 draft pick, right? Like they have a good enough draft pick where they should be able to take advantage. If they obviously do your research, but I guess that's the case for every team and every pick. So maybe Seattle's a team to look out for next year. I still think they need a quarterback upgrade. The Rams move into the playoffs as a team that who knows what's going to show up. Sometimes they look like one of the worst teams in the NFL. Sometimes they look like one of the best. You never know which Rams team you're going to get. And I think they're going to be carrying that attitude into the playoffs against the Minnesota Vikings team that they already played once this year. Who did I pick to win? I did pick the Seahawks. I'm getting hot on a winning streak, and it's, I think, looking a little bit better. We're going to hit that 11-win total that's needed. Chargers and Raiders, I did put a qualifier on here, and the qualifier didn't matter I guess it did. I said the Chargers are going to win this game if they have something to play for. They absolutely did. With a win over the Raiders, they would move from the 6 seed and going to Baltimore to the 5 seed and going to play Houston. I don't know about you guys, but the way the teams have looked, I'd much rather play Houston than Baltimore, especially on the road. The Raiders weren't very good, and this game was closer than a lot of people probably thought it should have been at first. But the Raiders, or the Chargers rather, found a way to pull away at the end. They won by 2 touchdowns, and Antonio Pierce is now fired for the Raiders. So maybe that tells you how their season went, even if they did play better towards the end. Same thing kind of happened with them last year. They gave Pierce the job, and then despite a couple big wins and a hot finish, maybe didn't want to take too much stock in the way the team ended after they did last year. And it didn't seem like they improved much this year. Big win for the Chargers. They are back in the playoffs under the first year of Jim Harbaugh. Who did I pick? I did pick the Chargers. Jets and Dolphins. The Dolphins were eliminated with this loss. They were also eliminated with a win by the Broncos. They were in it till the end, the last week of the season, which is impressive for a team that started 2-6. But the Jets win this game in what could be Aaron Rodgers' final game. It looks like it's his final game with the Jets. And after starting off bad for New York, they ended up taking control of this game. Miami with 4 turnovers. That can't ever happen when you're fighting for your playoff life. Kind of embarrassing performance in a lot of ways. It seemed like once the Jets started flashing the scoring board where the Broncos were 3-4 touchdowns up, the Dolphins team kind of fell apart. Hence the turnovers and the defense going from playing lights out to not playing as well anymore. Jets pick up a win, still going for a top draft pick, still might feel like they're not that far away from competing, and they do have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. But I think they have some coaching problems, some culture problems. We'll see what happens with the Jets. At least they got this win. If you're the Dolphins, you have a lot to address next season. Most importantly, figure out what's going on with Tyreek Hill with some of his cryptic messaging. Figure out how to keep Tua healthy. I think this is a season where the Dolphins are definitely in the playoffs, potentially even competing with Buffalo if Tua's healthy. Don't forget, Miami almost went into Buffalo and beat Buffalo when the second game Tua came back. And in that Buffalo game, Buffalo won it with a last-second 61-yard field goal with their kicker who seemed incapable before then. So, Miami, you could argue if Tua was healthy, would have been right there with Buffalo and the contenders. But when your starting quarterback misses 6.5, 7 games a year, it's hard to do anything. It seems like Tua has some problems staying healthy. Jets take advantage. Dolphins out of the playoffs, heading for a top 15 pick. Jets, I believe, are top 10. Definitely, but at the back half. Who did I pick to win? I did pick the Jets. Last game, the big game of the week. Who was going to be the 1 seed and who was going to be the 5 seed in the NFC? And the Lions at home blow out the Vikings. It did not look good for Darnold. Is Darnold finally kind of reaching his is the other shoe dropping? I've been worried about it for a while, especially beginning of the season, and I kind of put it up because he was still playing well. The Vikings were playing well. He didn't look good in this game. Vikings didn't look good as a team. Lions win big behind a great game from Jahmyr Gibbs. And now the Lions have locked up the 1 seed. And for a team that's had a lot of injuries this year, hurt by a lot of injuries, it's going to be nice to have that extra week of rest to try and get some guys back. Big win for the Lions. Both of these teams could very well be Super Bowl contenders. And in some ways, it's a shame that if they see each other in the playoffs, it will be the second round and not the conference championship. But if you're an Eagles fan, you are glad to almost happy to be the 2 seed to avoid both of these two teams as they should be on the other side of the bracket. Who did I pick to win? I did pick the Lions. So now that we have summarized all the game, now it's time for the big reveal. Did I hit the goal you guys put in front of me of 70% or better correct guessing percentage? If you're keeping track, you might know the answer because I stopped keeping track for you. We did have a long win streak to end the week, but here we go. As you can see, week 18, we had a 12-4 week, an incredible finish. It was looking, after week 14, it wasn't looking great. And then 14-2, 12-4, 13-3, 12-4. Great finish the last month of the season to bring me to a 192-80 record. I needed 190 and a half to be at 70%, so I really need 191. Nice, easily done math here. with a 0 in the 80, but 192 and 80 on the season, which equates to a 70.56%. So if we round up, it's 71%. So just finishing over the goal of 70%, which sounds like it is a little bit low. I think it's quite impressive. A lot of pickers are usually in the mid 60s. I think 70% plus is definitely above average and very difficult to do. Maybe I'm just saying that because I did it and it was the goal you guys gave me, but um, I'm very happy that I made it. We'll see. Well, maybe we'll have to do a challenge next year, and next August when we come back for the NFL season, I'll have to talk with you guys, the audience, do a preview podcast and ask what the goal should be on the weekly predictions. But for now, that doesn't matter. That's months away, which in some ways is sad. And the NFL season isn't over yet. We're going to get into the playoffs. But I hit the goal of 70% at 192 and 80 with 12 wins this week, and I only needed 11, and I was very worried, if you guys remember last week, because it's so hard last week of the season when teams are resting starters, whether because they're really bad or they're really good and they just don't want their stars to get hurt. So it's sometimes hard to pick these games, and I got enough right. So now that we have the excitement of completing the goal, let's move into the playoffs and some playoff talk. Here we have the AFC playoff bracket, and the thing that sucks is I'm kind of spoiling my picks, but just pretend you don't see the right side of this. Pretend you only see the first column. We're just going to go top down. Chargers versus Texans. I think the Chargers are playing better. Jim Harbaugh has coached in a Super Bowl. He's coached a team to the Super Bowl as a head coach. I have faith in him. I think the Chargers have been more consistent this year. This could turn into a defensive battle. I think the Texans' defense has played well pretty much all year. So is the Chargers, but the Chargers' offense has been more consistent than the Texans. I don't think the Texans' offensive line is going to hold up as well as Los Angeles is, and I think that the Chargers, the 5 seed, are going to go on the road and pick up a victory over the Texans, kind of maybe relax some of the nerves from 2 years ago when the Chargers gave up that massive lead to Jacksonville in Jacksonville. Chargers move on as the 5 seed. That doesn't mean they're guaranteed to play the 1 seed. It just means because in the NFL, they reseed after every round, so the lowest seed always plays the highest seed. So let's move on to the next game, the Steelers and the Ravens in Baltimore. Rivalry game, it might be close. It usually is close between these two teams. They don't like each other. They've already played each other twice this year. They've split the season series with the home team winning each game. I don't even know if I think this is going to be close. I think the Ravens are getting better and better. I think that the Ravens are also just the better team. I trust their offense more. The defense, maybe the Steelers is a tad bit better, but it's not much of a difference. Not enough to make up for the gap in the offensive ability in both teams. And I think this is a game where the Ravens could win by double digits and kind of blow the doors off a little bit. Maybe it won't be so much of a classic AFC North rivalry matchup in the playoffs. I definitely like the Ravens to win this game. I think they're the more talented team. And then the Broncos and the Bills. Credit to the Broncos for making the playoffs. They've definitely outpaced my expectations, and I think most people's expectations. Bo Nix with a fantastic rookie year. I find it incredibly unlikely that they are able to go into Buffalo and pick up this win. Truthfully, out of all the first round games, the team that I think has the lowest percentage chance of winning is the Broncos. Definitely in the AFC, potentially in both conferences combined. And that's not to say Denver isn't a good team. I just don't know if I like the matchup. I think the Bills are going to be able to score a lot of points. And even with how up and down the Bills defense has been this year, they're going to be able to get enough stops against Bo Nix. And really, Buffalo just isn't a friendly place to play in any time of year, especially in the playoffs, especially for a true rookie quarterback. I think the Bills win this one, and I think that they win it by double digits, potentially multiple touchdowns. So keep in mind, the highest seed always faces the lowest seed remaining, and the highest seed always hosts. So with my first round picks, it would be the Chiefs, the 1 seed, playing the Chargers, the 5 seed, and it would be the 2 seed Bills hosting the 3 seed Ravens. And quite frankly, I think this is the 3 best teams in the AFC have been, it feels like, for the last 3 or 4 years. I guess the Bengals fans might want to say something there, but really the 3 best teams to me this year in the last couple of years have been the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Bills. Nobody in the AFC has been able to consistently break into that upper echelon with those guys. And so the fact that I have them making it is no surprise, and I think that that is the most accurate representation of the teams that deserve to go to the Super Bowl the most in the AFC. A Chargers Chiefs rematch would terrify me if I'm a Chiefs fan. It's your 3rd time playing them and you've beat them twice. It's hard to beat a team 3 times in one season. And I think the Chargers would keep this game incredibly close, but the Chiefs will be rested. The Chiefs will also have playoff Mahomes, maybe some playoff home cooking in Kansas City. I know a lot of people think that's what's probably going to happen. And I think those couple things, the experience, think it's the Chiefs over the hump here and would beat the Chargers, meaning they will be hosting the AFC Championship game. The Bills and Ravens. Again, this is another rematch in the regular season, and the Ravens kind of wrecked the Bills. Josh Allen had one of his worst games of the year, just like he had a bad game against the Texans, but I have them being eliminated, so that won't matter. Bills, Ravens. I think both of these teams can score a lot of points, but I think the Ravens defense is better suited. I just think it's better than the Bills defense is currently, and B, I think it's better suited to stop the Bills than the Bills defense is to stop the Ravens. I think the Bills' strength, I think, is in their front 7. I'm worried about their secondary, and the Ravens are usually pretty good at running the ball, and I don't think that the Bills secondary, especially with the Ravens having 2 elite tight ends in the passing game, will be able to routinely stand up against the Ravens passing offense, and I think it'll result in the Ravens win. What I do think is funny here, with these 3 teams I was just talking about, is they kind of all played each other this year, as they normally do, because they're all division winners, and division winners always play each other next season. But Patrick Mahomes beat Lamar Jackson in Kansas City opening week of the season. Then you have Lamar Jackson beat Josh Allen in Baltimore. And then Josh Allen beat Patrick Mahomes in Buffalo. So all these teams kind of have this triangle going on of where we beat them, but you can't beat them, right? That type of thing. And the home team has won every single time these teams have played, and they've all been good games. But I see Baltimore being one of the few teams capable of having the toughness required to walk into Buffalo and beat the Bills. And I think Baltimore is just a little bit better, even if Buffalo finished with a better record. And for those reasons, I have Baltimore beating them, meaning we have the first game of the NFL season was Kansas City, Baltimore, and Kansas City. The AFC Championship game will be a repeat. And unlike that first game, I think Baltimore's ready to go. I think the Kansas City luck train that has been this season runs out, and I think the Ravens go in there. And fair disclaimer, I said the Ravens were the best NFL team coming into this year and picked them to beat the Chiefs in Kansas City week 1. So maybe I'm buying into the Ravens hype and I am becoming delusional again. But I'm going to pick the Ravens to go to the Super Bowl because, as I said once, and I'll keep saying it, I'll say it 1,000 times until people listen, at every team's highest potential, I think the Ravens have the highest potential. I think they're the hardest team to beat when they are playing at their best. And I think the Ravens are starting to get there. If Jim Harbaugh doesn't mess it up, which is a very real concern sometimes, this Ravens team is going to go to the Super Bowl. So I'm going to pick them to go through the Bills and the Chiefs on the road, I might add, to make it to the Super Bowl. Just like the 3 seed from the AFC made it last year, the Chiefs. They beat the Bills and the Ravens on the road as a 3 seed. I think the Ravens are going to do the same thing this year. So let's move over to the NFC. And again, let's block out the right half of this bracket. Who do I have seeing the Ravens in the Super Bowl? Well, the Vikings and Rams is an interesting matchup. Vikings didn't play very well the last week of the regular season, lost the 1 seed, and they're going to Los Angeles to play the Rams. And I don't know if many of you guys remember this, but the Rams on Thursday Night Football beat the Vikings in Los Angeles early this season. So the Rams aren't going to be scared. The Rams have Matthew Stafford. They have Puka Nacua. They have Cooper Kupp in the passing game, those three guys. They also have Kyron Williams, who's a pretty darn good running back. And the Rams defense also has the best rookie pass rusher in the NFL. And in spite of all that, I think the Vikings remember who they are. I think the Vikings show up. Brian Flores coming back with some new defensive looks to maybe confuse the Rams, comes out. And I truly believe that this Vikings team is going to come out and beat the Rams team. I think the Vikings are better. And I think, and wholeheartedly, the Vikings get their revenge from earlier earlier in the season when the Rams got them, and they go to the rematch in Detroit for the second time in 3 weeks. Well, I just spoiled. Not granted, we can see it, but that should tell you who I have winning the next 2 games, because for the Vikings to go to Detroit as the 5 seed, it would mean the 6 and 7 seeds would have to lose. I have the Buccaneers playing the Commanders. Commanders are having an incredible season, far outpacing what anybody thought they would do, and they're probably in a pretty good spot for next year, even though I think personally Jaden Daniels might be in for a sophomore slump just like CJ Stroud was this year. I see the Commanders offensively being able to hang in there a little bit, and their defense isn't bad, and despite the Buccaneers having an up-and-down defense, I truthfully think this Buccaneers offense, even without Chris Godwin, has looked fantastic. They have guys like McMillan who have stepped up in the wide receiver core. You always have Mike Evans, and then the trio of running backs the Buccaneers have, led by Bucky Irving, has been really good to end this season. And I just think that at home, the Buccaneers offense is going to be too much for the Commanders to keep up with. This could be a high scoring game. These two teams, back when Brady was in Tampa, played a phenomenal playoff game in DC where the Buccaneers won. I don't think DC gets revenge. Tampa's going to win a pretty good game that I think could get pretty high scoring. Tampa moves on to the next round as the 3 seed. And then Green Bay and Philadelphia, a rematch of the second game of the NFL season, the Friday night game in Brazil. Packers, Eagles escaped with a win after Jordan Love got hurt at the end. And this Packers team, I truthfully feel like, is better than the 7th team in the NFC. But they're playing in the toughest division in the NFC. And they happen to have the Lions and Vikings have incredible seasons. Granted, they lost all 4 games to those teams. I think the Packers are probably better than the Commanders and Rams. But the way the seeding works out and the way that it goes and the way the schedule worked out, the Packers are below those teams. And now they have to go to a Philly team. I truthfully believe Jalen Hurts is starting. If he doesn't start the playoffs, throw this whole bracket out, because I don't know if the Eagles can win. Definitely not beat an elite team without him. But I'm just playing like Jalen Hurts is going to play. There's no way he misses this game in my mind. I think the Eagles come out and beat the Packers by more than they did the first time. Again, I think the Packers are a good team, but losing to Philly and playing a close game to Philly in Brazil first week of the season is very different than going to Philadelphia in the playoffs and with a rowdy crowd on the road and actually beating them. It's a harder situation, not because Green Bay's scared of the cold. It's colder in Green Bay than it is in Philly, but just because that Philly crowd is always insane. Never fun to play them in Philly. And I have the Eagles beating the Packers. And I truthfully think the Eagles are just a little bit better than the Packers in every facet of the game. Maybe it's a draw on quarterbacks, but their running back is better. Their offensive line is better. Their receiving core is better. Their defensive line is better. Their secondary is better. The linebacker play, I think I'll lean the Eagles. So it's not that I think the Packers are bad. It's just that I think the Eagles are a top 5 team in the NFL, and I think they're just a little bit better than the Packers in almost every single position on the field, and I don't think the Packers overcome it. Therefore, the Eagles, the 2 seed, move on to host the Buccaneers in the second round. And in that game, the Buccaneers and Eagles, I don't think the Buccaneers are very well matched up with the Eagles at all. The Eagles' offense or defensive line and really defense as a whole is going to be able to slow down the Buccaneers' offense more than I think they're used to, and I just don't see the Buccaneers' defense getting nearly enough stops. I think the Eagles' offensive line should dominate that game, and I think Saquon Barkley has a big game, which always makes it easier on Jalen Hurts and the passing game. I think the Eagles win that game and move on to the NFC Championship game. Vikings and Lions. Uh, yeah, they've played twice. Lions have won both, and I always say it. It's hard to beat a team 3 times in one season, which is why you don't always like to see division rivals in the playoffs. But by golly, I think the Lions are just better. Right, they're better. I don't see the Vikings being able to go into Detroit, even with Detroit's defensive injuries, which some of those guys are starting to come back, and beating Detroit, meaning we have a 1-2 matchup in the NFC Championship game. And I really want to pick the Lions. I love the Lions as a story. I kind of like Dan Campbell. You know, he's a little bit psycho. Definitely seems like a good motivator. I think the Eagles are healthier than the Lions, and these are 2 top 5 teams in the NFL, by the way. I think these are the 2 best teams in the NFC, and it is kind of chalk, and the best 2 teams in the conference don't always play each other. But I just think these teams are just a little bit better than everybody else chasing them. I'm still concerned about the Lions' defense because their injuries. They're getting healthier. They have guys like I can never say his name correctly, so forgive me, but Anzalone, right? Something or Anzalone. I can never say it. I'm sorry for butchering the name, but like they have their guys getting healthier. I don't think they're going to have enough guys healthy in enough time to stop the Eagles. I think the Eagles and Lions will be a phenomenal battle, and the Lions have a great offense, and even with the Eagles' great defense, I think they score. But I think the Eagles find a way to win that game like 34-31, 37-34, 35-34, somewhere in there. Like I think it get high scoring despite the defenses both playing well over the year. And I don't. It's so hard to pick against the Lions, especially at home. But I think the Eagles are one of the few teams that can do it. I think the Eagles go on to the Super Bowl, which means my Super Bowl. Ravens and Eagles, it is a rematch. This game has already happened once this year. And the Eagles beat the Ravens. In Baltimore, I might add. But in this rematch, I think the Ravens are a different team. I believe they're a little bit healthier. Not that they had significant injuries, but I think the Ravens will be ready to go. The Eagles' second Super Bowl trip in 3 years. Ravens haven't been in a while, but John Harbaugh has, and he's won one. And I just think the Ravens will be playing better. I think the Ravens are tough enough. And I think it's an absolutely heck of a game. Maybe like 3 or 4 lead changes, a couple ties, back and forth, back and forth. I was going to say it's going to be a defensive struggle, which could very well happen because these are both elite defenses. But I think both of the quarterbacks, both of the running backs are good enough to put some points on the board. And I think this is a game that could be in the mid 20s, potentially low 30s, but I'm feeling like the 20s. And I think in an absolute beautiful football game full of big plays, absolute massive athletes, right? Like both these teams got some big guys. I think this is a really exciting football game from every single facet you look at it. And I think the Ravens win the rematch very narrowly, and the Eagles lose their second close Super Bowl the Eagles lose their second close Super Bowl in 3 years, and the Ravens get their third Super Bowl trophy, which most of the NFL has had trouble doing. There's a lot of teams that have 2 that haven't been able to get 3, and for the Ravens being one of the newer franchises, that would be really impressive and give them 1 championship in every decade of the 2000s. Yeah, so I just think the Ravens are kind of have it figured out, and I think they're going to continue figuring it out in the playoffs. And when they play to their potential, I don't think anybody can beat them. I do want to say one thing. I don't have a graphic for it, so I'm just going to tell you while I'm sitting here thinking about it. I think there's 5 teams that can win the Super Bowl this year. The Vikings are like the 6th team that are not in the same echelon in my mind, but they're also kind of above a lot of the other playoff teams. So I want to give credit to them because they've had a great season. But going into the playoffs, the 5 teams I think that have a chance to do it, that are the best teams, everyone's like, oh, of course you say it. It's chalk. Look at their records and look at where they're seated. Well, they're seated there for a reason. Usually the cream of the crop, the best teams are the best teams for a reason, and they usually find a way to rise to the top. In the AFC, the only 3 teams I think are able to make it and win it are the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Ravens. And the NFC is the Lions and Eagles. I think that the Super Bowl matchup likely comes from that combination, and I think your Super Bowl champion, I would say 90% of the time is coming. If you were to play this 1,000 times, 90% of the time plus your Super Bowl champion is coming from that group of 5. And as you can see, and as you've already heard me say, I think the Ravens and Eagles play a rematch, and the Ravens win that rematch and take home the Super Bowl trophy this season. Thank you guys for coming out and listening to the episode. This is the final episode on the 2024-2025 NFL season. I didn't want to do a weekly playoff thing because that gets too complicated, and I kind of want to look into some other things, some other leagues, some other sports. So please let me know in the comments of this video what you want to see. For every listener I see, every view I see, I want to see a comment. I don't care if you've never commented before. This is a safe space. Everybody go and comment what you want to see next, whether it's a series, whether it's an episode, and I want to see it. So if I see 50 views, I want 50 comments of suggestions, and I'll take whatever the most liked comment is, if you know how to do that, or whatever seems like it's the most common thing. Thank you for spending time listening to this episode. It's sad the NFL season is almost gone. We only have a month left. I hope you guys have enjoyed the NFL season. I've never revealed my NFL fandom to you guys because I want to take it out and try and be as unbiased as possible, if that is a thing. So I'll say I've had an interesting NFL season on terms of my fandom. I hope everybody has hope. Remember, don't let them ruin your day, because sometimes it's difficult for me. But in all seriousness, thank you guys for spending time. I really hope you enjoyed this series. Another thing I want you guys to see, comment. So I should see plenty of comments. If you're listening to this, please go and comment. I can't make that clear enough. Go down and tell me what your season record was, or tell me what your best week, or tell me just something fun about your experience when it came to picking games this season. Once again, thank you for all listening to all the episodes this season. I hope everybody enjoyed. We'll be back at it next year. Come follow me on X. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. Hope you had a good holiday season. Have a good new year. Peace.